What's great about a startup is, by the sheer nature of the mentality of people that startups attract, it's always open to improvement. It's always like, well, what's a better way of doing this? What's a more efficient way of doing this?
Yeah.
Which means that you can have that conversation quite easily and things can change quite easily.
Yeah.
Which is quite refreshing.
Okay, so we are joined today's episode by Kate Thrumble, who is our head of people at ScreenCloud. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are our first female guest. I mean, we've only had 4 guests, I think. So, but you're our first female guest. So that's
awesome. Do I get a prize?
You should get one. Well, we should probably get an anti-prize for
yeah,
for
true. You
taking
should.
four guests to get this long too. But so Kate's joined us. When did you join? About 3 months ago now.
Almost 4, yeah.
Almost 4 months ago.
Yeah.
As our head of people, and the last podcast we did, we talked about the need for a head of people and how we came to that discovery of that this is something that we needed, and we thought it'd be really good to actually talk to the person who's doing it all for us. So welcome. Do you
with
want
us.
Just
With us, yeah. No.
Yeah. Still involved a bit in people.
Always getting criticised. Whatever. I'm gonna say something wrong. So, would it be good to start off with you? Just give a very, very short bit of background of your life in the world of HR and all things.
Yeah, what a crazy life, yeah.
The rock and roll life.
Yeah, exactly. So prior to this, I was in the sort of advertising and marketing sector for about 6 years, or the agency world. And then before that, had a stint in the fashion industry and publishing. I actually started in recruitment and then moved into what they call a generalist HR role, which is what I'm doing now. So,
and I think you were saying earlier, the group that you work with was obviously much bigger than ScreenCloud. It was like 4,000 people.
Yeah, plus if you include it was made up of loads of different networks. So yeah, huge.
And your bit was, did you say about 150?
Yeah, so for the UK offices, 150 people.
So yeah, so I suppose that for us that's great because you effectively have taken. So for me, Mark and Luke, we've ran a business before this, but I think the biggest we ever got to was about 35 people. So for us, having someone who's sort of been there and done that, kind of worked with those size organisations is exactly what we needed. And when we hired for your role, we kind of realised how much of an important role it was. I think Mark, you sort of sifted through. What did you say, about 200? CVs?
Yeah, 200 CVs in total, which is more HR CVs than I thought I'd ever read in my life. But mainly to. I mean, it was really kind of challenging because I'd never recruited for that role before. So I actually had to firstly, I guess, really learn what the actual skill set is of someone like that, because we've never worked with someone in that capacity before. We've never had that many people. So I think it was a bit of kind of learning on the job of, like, you have to kind of really know or get a sense of what the role should be in order to judge who the best person would be for it. And what kind of came out of, aside from the ones who just weren't kind of right, but there was still quite a lot of people who seemed like they would be able to do a good job, was to really kind of hone in on the aspects of that person and what they wanted and what they were strong at, to sort of, and I think it really came from people who had a real passion for recruiting and attracting, and those who had a passion for sort of growing and retaining. And I'd say that's more where you are.
Yeah,
and that's what I think was more important for us, was taking the group of people that we already have and figuring out how we're going to kind of evolve with them, as well as also then figuring out when people do join us, like how do they come in and have a great experience by joining us. And I think the recruitment side felt like we could come to that a bit later. We just needed to get the house a bit more in order, and I think we just kind of done it very much instinctively, and that just doesn't scale brilliantly, really.
And all the things that if you were a startup listening to this podcast and you heard that thing of like, well, you really need to get, if you've got to 50 people and you haven't got a head of people, then you've probably left it too late. What's your kind of sense of why 50 is the magic number, or even if it is a magic number? I know. So just to say in a bit of context, we're at about 65 people now, and definitely from our point of view, we've changed a lot since we were 30 people. It's more than just doubling. It feels lots of other things have happened as well.
Yeah.
What's your kind of take?
I think it's interesting, that golden number of 50, because I think the wrong thing to do would be like, right, we're now 50, hire. I think as founders, you've got to want this role. This role and the kind of finance lead, you've got to really want it, because it also means giving up part of what historically you guys have been responsible for, which is a big, step change. But I think the reason why that 50 is probably bounced around is because the company at 10, everyone kind of gets involved in everything to make the product the best it can be, and you get behind it. Then moving into 20 to 30, roles are slightly more defined, but there's probably still a bit of, could you take the rubbish out or whatever it might be. And then as you step into 50, not only is it becoming more and more defined, you have people that have then been with that company for a couple of years now, who are starting to think, hang on, what do the next couple of years look like? This has been a brilliant journey, but almost getting to the point where it's a bit, what's in it for me now? I've given 2 years of my life to this place. What's in it for me? And so to bring in somebody at that point to then focus on that, I can understand where they get that figure from.
Yeah, because you're right, actually, because when you very first start, for everybody it's an experience, and there's a potential to, especially when you're in the early stages, you tend to hire people who've got that capacity to grow. Yeah. But then, as you say, like 2 years down the line, you actually have to kind of deliver against that and go. And typically, I imagine, well, certainly in our case, as founders, you're kind of rushing around all over the place, trying not to get too distracted, but there are lots of distractions. And it's quite hard to sit down and go, right, okay, let's have a real think about your career path.
Yeah.
So
also communication changes, because I've never worked at a company of 10 people, but I would imagine you just have a chat with 10 people.
Yeah.
Right? And then suddenly at 50, you're having to do things which you guys do, really well, the all hands, the regular communications, the founder updates. There's more of that so that everybody knows what's going on. But with that, there then gets little cluster groups, so there's suddenly a bit more noise in the system than 10 people around a table having a frank conversation.
Yeah.
So to have a point of contact for employees as well is no bad thing.
And do you think, like, is there a big shift from your experience of where you were working before, sort of culturally? Is it a lot different coming to a startup?
Culturally, not. It's the same kind of person that I think is attracted to, somebody that doesn't want to wear a suit to work, because, as superficial as that sounds, I think that sums up a lot. But in terms of processes, of course, there's so much more in a big corporate. They're addicted to Outlook. They have to have a hard drive, and of course there's a printer, and you print stuff just because you can. Whereas suddenly moving somewhere here, I think I felt a bit weird when I was like, I'm the only one with a pen and paper. I feel like I've gone back into the dark ages in terms of my mindset. And but actually you take a step back and you think there's actually quicker ways of doing stuff. Why are these huge corporates doing such slow processes when there's much quicker ways of doing it? So while you bring the knowledge of a big corporate, actually joining a startup, you're learning a lot. And then in terms of HR, you're then thinking, how could this work for my world within this? So there's differences, but some similarities as well, I'd say.
Yeah. Did you was it a shock? Was there anything shocking when you first joined that you thought,
no
my
paper,
God.
no pens and paper? I was like, whoa, everyone's got their laptop open in a meeting. This is mad. But then you just get used to it so quickly. I think the other thing is everything was on Google and everything's kind of in the cloud.
Yeah.
And that's a bit weird to not, or, why? No stationary cupboard. That was a bit nuts. Yeah. But all good things. Then you start to take a step back and you're like, well, why not? It works. And it does. And by doing that, it means you can work from anywhere.
Yeah.
So you can actually be flexible. Whereas these big corporates are saying that they can, but actually they're not set up to do it.
That was one of the beautiful things about, because as I say, I keep saying we've been running businesses together since 2004. But actually with ScreenCloud, and this is Mark really, there was a chance to kind of go, right, if I could create my perfect...
Where do I want to work?
My perfect company, how would it be structured? Well, for a start, everything would be on the cloud.
Yeah.
So actually, it's nice. That's one of the nicest things about doing a startup. You don't have any of that legacy stuff that you have to... Because it's quite hard. If they've got records dating back 20 years or whatever, to suddenly go, right, we're going to scan all that somehow and stick it on, Yeah. But the idea of not having files on the shelf where you go and pull out... Did you have did people have to fill out forms?
Loads of forms. Love a form. Loads of forms. Yeah. I don't love a form, just to be clear. That's changed my life. But it was a lot like that. But also it's, there's, if you wanted to change something, it's like, well, you're not going to, are you? Because you're part of a group or somebody about 10 levels up from you somewhere in the world has decided this. Whereas what's great about a startup is, by the sheer nature of the mentality of people that startups attract, it's always open to improvement. It's always like, well, what's a better way of doing this? What's a more efficient way of doing this? Yeah. Which means that you can have that conversation quite easily and things can change quite easily.
Yeah,
which is quite refreshing.
And I guess there's always that thing with founders, especially. There's always that. It's kind of easier to sort of logically say we're going to hire a developer because you think that needs to be developed, or hire a marketing person, or especially a salesperson. You think if I hire another salesperson, I'll make more sales. Whereas there is a bit of a leap of faith again in thinking about anyone watching this who's sort of at the sort of 20, 30 person mark, thinking, okay, that's a salary of someone who's not going to be selling more licenses or building more stuff. They're actually going to. But I mean, having said that, obviously, I would say that you pay for yourself pretty quickly, because it means suddenly, as a founder, you don't have to do things that you're not expert in doing anyway, which is like the kind of the whole thing around recruitment and the sort of legal stuff and all that kind of stuff. We're kind of making it up as you go along. So, but it is. I think it's quite a challenge for a founder to change that mindset, to go, okay, I should be doing everything, especially anything that's not directly contributing to the bottom line, to say, actually, you know what, this is a really, really, if you think people are, it's a cliche, people are your most important assets, but in a knowledge-based company like ours, technology company, it's our biggest investment every month.
Well, I think controversially, people aren't your biggest asset at the beginning. It's completely your product. I think at the very, very start, because it doesn't, obviously, if you don't have a good team building that product, the product won't be great. But I think right at the very beginning, the whole company will fall flat on its face if the product doesn't get any traction. But I think then there is that switch. And I think that's where the mentality is because very much that early product is very founder driven in terms of the ideas, maybe even developing it, technical founder developing it. You're putting so much founder driven, and then just a few people around that founding group getting it out there. But then that's only just a very, very, very start point. And then assuming that works, you completely switch gears, and it's now all about the team fulfilling the potential of that, and much less about the sort of heroics might be a bit strong, but it's about this kind of just big effort from a few people. It's actually much more about a collective effort of people kind of coming together. And I think that's probably what I think mentally is quite tricky, is that switch from I do everything to now it's actually all about other people doing it as well or better than me, but breaking down across all of those various teams and things like that.
Also, just going back to that idea of the 50 point as well, for the employees, it's kind of cutting the umbilical cord with the founders as well. So, because what you don't want to do as you scale is just get a whole company that's all mini founders, and they're exactly the same as you three, and that's as far as it goes. You want an incredibly diverse workforce that's questioning the way that things are done, while you guys are still leading it, of course. But that's going to be much more enriching than just having, mini versions of you three. So having an HR function means that you're almost becoming the coach to those employees to enable them to step into these roles, to really own who they are, rather than just, I'm going to be a mini Mark or a mini David or a mini Luke.
And I think from my point of view as well, when we first talked about this role, I hadn't really given it, I suppose my last experience of HR was working when I worked at Pearson. In fact, I don't even. But large companies and the role of HR, I think, has changed a lot.
Yeah. It's usually got quite negative connotations.
Yeah.
How do you kind of see for a sort of startup company or a company at our kind of size? What do you sort of see the role of head of people really being, or how has it evolved over the last sort of 3 or 4 years?
Because HR is one of those funny ones that's historically it was your office admin that just sorted stuff out, and then that eventually evolved into the office manager / HR manager. I think it was called personnel, and then that evolved into HR, and then there were buzzwords like talent around, and now I think we're moving into people, or God knows what it will be next week. I mean, for a function that's apparently responsible for job titles, it's got about 10 billion, so how ironic. But yeah, I think the role, how I set it up here, so as you guys know, I met with every person in the company, and I was wanted to be very clear on, what do you think HR is? Because some people might have been fired. That was their last experience with HR, or had a very horrible HR person, or a great one. Or
because they were being made part of a redundancy program.
Or has never worked with HR before. So it was really important to me to kind of say what my take on it is, which, to sum it up, to use a football analogy, which I know some people like Mark do like these football analogies. So if you think about a football team, that's
it's a game of two halves, right?
That is the employees as the team. Then you guys as founders, as the manager, we've got 3 of you. And so the role of HR is really that coach role. So that's sort of in between the team and the manager, enabling both sides as well to be the best that they can be. And working with individuals, teams within teams, and the whole company.
And when you were kind of having those one-on-one conversations, are people kind of a little bit cynical to start with, scared that you were kind of like assessing them, or that kind of thing?
Of course they were. If somebody sat there saying, I've got 10 questions for you, here we go. So it's about setting the scene and just saying, this might feel a bit like an interview, sorry about that, but it's the only way I'm going to get actual, data. And also in the HR bit, it was about presenting them, worst case. You might have worked somewhere where HR's awful, or, you dread HR. It was getting it out there so they weren't afraid to say that. Yeah. And then got all sorts of bits back. And some people were like, I have no idea why you're here. So.
That's funny, really, because I remember when I first introduced the concept of the role, I did it at our last company get together. Yeah. And the way I positioned it, and I said was, we're going to hire this role as like basically an investment back in all of you, because kind of if step back and look at it as objectively as anyone could look at their own company. Objectively, it's not easy, but it can be done a bit. I kind of thought. The main thing I felt bad about was the inconsistency, because like if I wasn't really busy on other things, such as like we were doing a fundraise or just had loads of new business on or whatever it might be in my role, and David would have had different things and Luke would have had different things. But basically when other stuff was really going on, HR kind of just fell away. And when it wasn't going on, we did put time into it and try to do the right thing and try and do it reasonably well. But I felt bad about the inconsistency, and I just thought, well, some people in this company are getting like really good kind of coaching and mentorship and stuff, and it's usually people working directly for us quite closely, and usually in a discipline that we're to a degree experts in. And they get it really, really good, and then others just sort of hardly get anything. And I just thought, well, this is terrible, and like. It's going to just build resentment. And so I just kind of said at the thing, like, I'm sorry, I know it's not been very good, but give me a few months and then I'll go off and, I'll dedicate a load of time to kind of, to sort of doing this. And then like almost everything, once you kind of start, in actually every team we've ever built, once you start to build the team, kind of think, how did we ever survive without it really? But I think that's quite a normal feeling.
Yeah.
And we're sort of, actually built the team up to 3 people now. Yeah. One's about to join, but that's quite good. Quick from 0 to 3 in 4 months.
No, it's pretty crazy. I suppose the sort of flip side to all this, obviously, is as a startup, you're, part of the whole thing is the culture of quick move, quick, everyone knows each other, being able to respond quickly to opportunities and quick decision making and that kind of stuff. And it's, one of the scary things potentially is putting in more of these processes could make you become the thing you don't want to be, which is a bit more corporate, a bit more hierarchical. Is that, do you think that's, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think
discuss.
I think it's the way that it's done. I always think the best thing with any of this stuff that could be a bit awkward, could be a bit uncomfortable, could be a bit annoying, is just to be human about it. So even in the, we're going through writing the very exciting expenses policy at the moment. And as I said, I hate the word policy. I much prefer kind of philosophy. This is our philosophy when it comes to expenses. But it's about being human. Why are we doing this? What's cool, what's not cool? And it's not about, trying to be too pally with people, but just in the tone of voice or in the way it's giving people a bit of context as to why we're doing this, then usually people are on board with it. When you just go hard with really corporate language that no one really understands and just no rationale behind it, then you can understand why people might reject it or think, this culture's changing. Actually, it's not changing. You guys, I'm sure, from your first employee have always been like, this is cool, this isn't cool. Yeah. And all we're doing is evolving that philosophy, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I suppose we've got so every year, just to explain, I say every year, we've done it once so far last year, and we're going to do it again this year because we're distributed. So we've got we have just people based remotely, and then we have 4 hubs. So we've got a hub in Bangkok, one in London, one in Belfast, and one in LA. What we do is every year we bring everyone together. We call it ScreenCloud Together, imaginatively. This year's going to be in Bangkok, but we were saying earlier that it's kind of weird. Like, so we do our all hands every couple of weeks, or sorry, every month. But it's you're sort of beamed via video into the different hubs. But as someone standing up and doing it, you're only probably talking to, say, 15, 20 people, depending on who's in the office that day. It's going to be quite weird, I think, standing up potentially in front of 70, 75 people by the time we do it in November. And also not really knowing everybody, which is kind of weird for me. But again, because in our past lives, we always, even the people that we didn't necessarily see every day, because we still had the office out in Bangkok, we kind of knew who they were. Yeah. And it's I guess it gets harder and harder as you get bigger to know everybody. And it's definitely I don't want to lose that, but at the same time I kind of recognise that you can't know everybody as well as you do when you're only 15 people.
Yeah, I think it's then about fine-tuning what you can do. You know, there are some leaders out there that make a point of knowing everybody's name and will literally learn the face and the name, so that if that person ever cross paths, they can say, oh, hi, Dave, and it means so much to that employee, and that's it. You know, I'm talking if you're like thousands of people here. Yeah. But for you guys, I guess it's about working out where can I add the impact so people feel like I am accessible, even though I can't be there for all of them all of the time, like I would have done when we were 10 people. But I think the ScreenCloud Together, brilliant. You know, if we can continue to do that yearly, great.
Yeah, it's a good way. I mean, it's not just for us as well, obviously, it's for everybody to meet everybody. But I think, yeah, it's just that sort of, you know, do you ever see that, what was that film? Is it The Circle? But it was the kind of, it's kind of that sort of idea. I mean, I'm not saying that we're ever going to be like Apple or whatever, or Google, but you know, you're literally standing up on a stage, and that won't happen this year. But you know, if we carry on next year, it could be in the hundreds, certainly. And it's kind of like, well, that's sort of slightly, that's very different to what we're used to, and kind of making sure that we do the right thing. And the other thing is just making sure that I don't know, that we're thinking in the right way about how's best to. You said earlier, I don't want to hire a group of people that look just like me or have exactly the same background as Mark, kind of thing, because that's not how we're going to come up with great new innovations and stuff. So how do we do that, and how do we, you know, as founders, again, another reason why it's so important, I think, probably to have someone like you on board is maybe to help us think through those challenges and tasks. Yeah,
and also we might not always get it right. We might try something, but then it's about evaluating and then moving forward. And I think it's being okay with that as well. You know, the ScreenCloud Together this year is so much bigger than it was last year. So can you do a carbon copy of what you did last year? Maybe not. Probably not.
Yeah. Even this year, it will be the only time I think we could do it in a location such as this. I think after that, it's going to have to get into more like an event space, just because of the size. There just aren't like normal buildings that you can have 150 people sat in a room easily.
Like, to corporate
we'll need microphones and stuff. I mean, if someone like scream your keynote out to 200 people, I mean, like, even that's a small difference, but you know.
I've got visions of you leaping across the stage going, developer.
Doing a Steve Ballmer dance, like with a really powerful, uplifting 80s anthem. You know.
In your one day.
Let's not do that.
But it's about keeping the core concept the same. So the reason for ScreenCloud Together in the first place, it's about keeping that the same, even if it might look and feel a bit different. And that goes back to the policies. All of that is the same stuff. It's the core stays the same. How you then flesh it out changes and evolves over time, I think.
Yeah. I know. I would think as I say, when Mark first floated the idea of, I think it's time for us to do, you know, to hire this, and actually then it coincided with me going to a conference that our investors held in Berlin, which was all peopled by heads of people. Yeah. And that was really interesting, even though I didn't really have much to contribute to it. It was just, you're just watching it and go, oh my God, we're not doing any of this stuff. You know, there's things around the onboarding. I mean, what was good is there was some statistics like around churn of staff and the onboarding process. And when you start to look at it, and for someone like me who's, you know, I'm a commercially minded guy, any kind of questions of cost benefit analysis, and you think, okay, well, we all know how expensive it is to hire people, and if you can say, well, actually, having a really, really good onboarding process, and that, as we said earlier, you can't just rely on a founder to do that, because the experience will be different from different, depending on the luck of the draw where you're actually joining the company.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the figures, but there's a very, very sizable link between that onboarding process and staff turnover.
Yeah.
And
The good news is on onboarding, I believe the bar is relatively low, because I have heard of people going to like major companies, turning up and like no one even knowing why they're there.
Yeah.
That's actually not uncommon.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
So I think the fact we now have one.
Should we explain that? Because I think it's quite good. I think it's quite unique.
We designed it. We designed it together. That was our first.
I remember
bit of
going back to your
automation.
point around startups. What's the difference? I remember that was in my first week, second week, and I suddenly found myself in this room just brainstorming, like, what could we do with automating onboarding? And I was a bit like, have I been transported to some sort of weird other galaxy here, where all of this is suddenly possible by the people with the company that I work with? Why is this not possible with the kind of multi-billion pound companies that it was just a real like, whoa, is this real? Is this not?
Because we're nerds. And nerds love doing this. I love implementing process. I don't like process for the sake of it, but I like process as the process as a product, really, which is what I wanted to do, was like that all of this workflow would kick off, something that would actually be quite surprising, quite fun, a bit quirky, but also thorough. And I think, from where obviously none of these things it's that smooth getting it going, but I think almost there. Broadly we're kind of
it's functioning. There's still tweaks, and as we said, it's constantly evolving, and we need to. But I think another thing we said was also to keep that human factor. So you guys have done a video so people can actually see what you look like.
Is it worth just quickly summarising the steps, because I think people will probably be quite interested to how does someone get onboarded? What's the process?
Yeah, so I think the big thing for us is almost what kind of pre-boarding. So before is that moment I've just resigned, I might be working a week or 3 months notice before I start with this new company. Yeah. How do we keep in touch with them? What's our way of doing it? So that's now a mixture for us of all automated, but written by us. Communications, there's one from me, there's one from you guys kicking off that also includes a video. They get sent a mug in the post as well, so they can sit back and watch these videos with a cup of tea or water or whatever they want to put in their mug. And then so there's kind of communication that's staggered depending on their notice period, so it's not overload, otherwise you might be like, what is this place I'm joining? And then
one of us.
Yeah, please, we love you. And then they start, but already they should have been set up on their computer, because we've now filled out this Google form, life-changing, to say to the manager, what do you need this person set up on? And it's all kind of starting to talk to each other. I think then once they're here, we could do with automating that a little bit more than we are doing currently. But the pre-boarding stuff, certainly that's, it's great. They just get added to a system and it just does it.
Basically, by day one, they turn up, their computer will all be here, all the peripheral devices are ordered. It should already be pretty much set up on all of the accounts which are relevant to them, and they will have had that drip email of just everything from the mission values all the way down to what to expect from your first day. I think it also does Google Calendar bookings for your buddy, and other things. So your diary already has entries in for various team meetings and things which will happen. So your first week is fairly well kind of planned out and is really consistent. And obviously we've had to do that amongst the 4 offices, not just the one. It's pretty cool.
I was just thinking, so we've just been working with this video AI stuff. Whether you could actually have the videos from the founders could actually go. Welcome, Kate. We're really looking forward to you. That's maybe a bit too freaky.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll keep on tweaking it. But there's still loads more we want to do. And in fact, actually, one of our other kind of big projects coming once we've got our in-house recruiter, who's going to join in September, I think. Is we're going to basically take it even further down the funnel from the first point you ever hear about ScreenCloud and routing it all the way through to your whole kind of including offboarding.
Yeah.
Because that's actually a big part of this
Yeah.
too. The people will leave.
Yeah.
We don't
And
have
keeping
very
in
high
touch
turnover.
with them
but-
as well. So as and when we get there, but yeah.
Cool.
So it's kind of implementing as much of that, but keeping it personal
Yeah.
as well and human. So it's human where it needs to be. It's automated where you just want it to just work.
Yeah.
And be consistent and also just who wants to do admin over and over again? It's pretty boring.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's been really great. It's hopefully that's been useful to people who are kind of facing the same sort of thing as we were like a year ago and just deciding or wondering whether they should go forward. Definitely do it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
You'll probably hand in your resignation tomorrow and we'll be like, oh, no.
Actually, I did have one more question before we go, because I think it was in the last podcast we talked about it. There's a point where, okay, we've talked about going too late on this, but like there presumably would have been a point where if you had looked at us, it wouldn't have been a very attractive role. Like say if we were only 15 people, or if we didn't have plans to, because I think
that's a good point,
it's the number of people, but it's also the rate at which you want to expand.
Yeah.
Like
with the person that we would have hired at 10 people wouldn't probably be the person that we'd want to be
no.
head of HR
So-
at 50 people.
Yeah.
So just from, if it's the point of view of another founder listening, which I think is the kind of people that listen to this, like because everyone's going, you can't go too early. Well, I'm like, bullshit. You can go too early because a good person wouldn't want to join at that stage. What do you think is the kind of core challenge when you look at that job description and goes, I'd really like to do that? What do you think
I think, from my point of view, it was, what have you got in place already? So it wasn't a complete blank canvas. You had stuff in place. It was working. It was an HR system for a start. It might not be the one we stay with forever, but there's one. So for me, it was like, right, okay, I can now do something with that. I think if it had been a role, it was like, you find the HR system, you create the very first policy on whatever. That for me and my experience probably wouldn't have been as attractive, and probably I think would attract a slightly different person than the type of person you were looking for.
Were you worried about us being a startup? I mean, was there a kind of minimum, we needed funding, or we needed to have had, we need to be revenue generating or whatever? Was there a kind of, or we needed to have at least 20 people, or at least
Not really.
Okay.
For me, it was going to be an adventure one way or another.
Okay.
So I wasn't really caught up. Somebody else might view it differently. For me, it was about the chemistry between you guys. So I think as an HR professional, you're only as good as your almost partner in crime, or the people that lead the company. Because I could be saying, let's do this, this, and this, but if you guys aren't interested in it, that's only going to go so far. So
that's true.
that was the most important thing to me,
Okay,
really.
that's interesting.
So be nerdy about onboarding processes because it's loads of fun. It is quite good fun.
And if you're worried about commercial return, there are stats that say that onboard. I mean, if anyone's ever paid a recruitment consultant, you know how painful it can be if you make a mistake on that basis. So.
And I think don't just hire an HR person because you've been told to. You really got to believe it and want it yourself, otherwise.
Yeah, and also, as you say, because we hadn't done this before, look at lots. I mean, Mark gave me 6 people to interview. He was like, "These are my top 6 people. Go off." And actually, we did this thing where we said, "Right, we'll not communicate throughout the process, and let's just see what we conclude." And we both concluded that we thought you were everyone was brilliant. I have to say, I think everyone that I spoke to would have done a good job. But I said, I think Kate stands head and shoulders above the rest. And you said, well, I think we differed on
We differed on 2 and
number
3.
2 and 3, but in terms of number 1,
Yeah.
you're a clear leader. It just kind of felt really right. And I think that, some of the things that you just said really chimed with some of the things that we believed and things like that.
Was that the Ricky Gervais jokes? Or
Yes.
I wish I could just do that thing where Ricky Gervais just cracks up at things like that. I was watching him in that thing on his cars the other day. He's got such an infectious laugh. Anyway.
we digress.
Yeah. Cool. So all in all, yay, brilliant. Do it.
If you believe in it.
If you believe in it. And take your time over it. And get the right person. And
Anything else to add, David
No.
Brent?
different drinks for different needs. Okay, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.